Hello, guys and girls. The program you are about to hear will be both fun and educational, but it is not a substitute for medical advice. Although we are doctors, we are not your doctors.
Hello and welcome to Travel Medicine. As always, I'm your friendly neighborhood internal medicine doc, Dr. J.
Hey all, this is your amazing pediatric infectious disease doc and researcher, Dr. Santhosh.
I keep telling you, it sounds better as uncanny.
I keep slipping up every time I introduce myself and say the word uncanned.
The uncanned infectious disease doctor and the uncanny infectious disease doctor carry slightly different connotations.
Hello all, I am your uncanny pediatric infectious disease doc and researcher, Dr. Santhosh.
Do you like amazing? Do you like uncanny?
I do like uncanny. I feel mysterious and kind of, unpredictable now.
Well, hello, listening audience, and welcome to July, our final episode of the season.
Yeah. I get super excited about this episode every single season.
And since it's July, that means it's time for everybody's favorite dun da 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 comic book medicine da 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 da
Woo!
starring da 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 Santosh da 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 and Josh da 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 comic book medicine.
And thanks to all that, we will make $0 on this demonetized episode.
For those of you unfamiliar with comic book medicine, each year we dig into the world of pop culture, graphic novels, film, and television to dissect what's possible, what isn't, and how it would work if it was.
Yeah, and this is all a wonderful lead-in to Dr. Josh's one of his absolute favorite times of the year when he makes his pilgrimage down to the wilds of San Diego for Comic-Con.
One of the panels I'm most looking forward to, of course, is the Marvel panel, but also to hear a little bit more about X-Men 97. And so this year, our theme is going to be a little bit more mutant based, and I will say, to me, my medmen.
It's so good. Yeah, of course we opened with an amazing vocal rendition of the theme music or the cartoon theme music from the hit cartoon X-Men that we all grew up with, of course, in the 1990s, eating cereal off our knees. And yeah, it's going to culminate in this, I guess, 90s style, you would say, sequel or follow up to the cliffhanger that was at the very, very end of X-Men, of that cartoon series.
So let's get into, well, how being an X-Man or a mutant works in the first place. Now, if you watch the cartoon or have seen the movies, you know that all mutants have a X gene that usually activates under times of high stress, most often during puberty or when being attacked by giant robots.
Yeah.
Whichever comes first. And
yeah.
And then that activates these uncanny abilities. But when you canonically, what is the X gene? Like how do you get the abilities that cause humanity to hate and fear them? How do the Sentinels track them through these abilities? And could real life mutants be out there today? Well, the answer is yes, but most of the time the mutation is something like, I can't drink milk, or I'm more prone to cancer. A lot less helpful than crime fighting.
Yeah. Unfortunately, most of these will be, very odd, mutations that we actually try to fight off or battle rather than embrace because they're detrimental to our health.
So if you go back far enough into the comics, the original X gene came from Celestials, those folks you saw in the Eternals movie that I don't think anyone watched, meddling in the junk DNA that's not part of our dominant genetic code, and then a millennia of evolution that allowed the deviance to kind of arise. And the X gene
Ooh.
is a randomized activation of junk DNA that can happen at any time in birth, like, say, Nightcrawler, in adolescence, like Jubilee, or could be completely dormant until the right combination of epigenetic triggers forces it to emerge, which is the difference between a mutant and a mutate. So, mutant is the first two are natural, while
Okay.
mutates are caused by outside elements. So, the Hulk is a mutate. Captain America is a mutate. Wolverine is a mutant, but also a mutate because of his adamantium.
Oh, Spidey would be a mutate then because
Exactly.
gotcha. He didn't start out that way. Got it.
But all of them get their powers from some change in epigenetic changes. Um,
Yeah. Oh, so just for those who are curious, Josh, did you know only about 2% of our massive genetic code, 6 billion genes, are actually made to code proteins? That's it. A bunch of our genetic code, we call it junk because it doesn't actually code for proteins. But the truth is we don't quite know what it does, and who knows, it could harbor these weird X genes and this kind of a thing. And then the epigenetics that you talk of are basically on off switches. So yes, we all have genes and that we can have, but the reason that we're just not a giant clump of cells that are all the same is because we have these timing mechanisms as well that can actually make a gene turn on and code a protein or turn off. And that is the mechanism on top of, or epigenes.
so, the mutant body contains quantum mechanical interactions located in clusters along the nervous system. These are going to generate energy, or these are going to generate exotic energy. Think the Force dimension, which is what Cyclops connects to, or
Uh,
any of the mutants who are energy based. Um,
Josh, I believe it's called the punch dimension.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, you were going to try to gloss right the hell over that, weren't you?
That even in the most minute amounts is tremendously powerful. Uh,
Yeah.
Now, because these clusters develop in utero, they're not without their dangers, as a mutant power or a coding gene could easily grow into a tumor and result in stillbirths. Remember, there's still a much higher population of normal humans than there is mutants or
Oh,
mutates. That's why they're in
yes.
a world that hates and feels them, hates
Sure,
and
sure.
fears them. Healthy mutants can initiate a neuronal signal that can modulate a pulseless energy that allows them to perform their abilities. Like, think the brain implants by Elon Musk that allow essentially telekinesis of paralyzed people through robots.
Oh, yeah. So essentially, those types of implants, what you do is you allow the brain to command a separate thing. You still have to wire it to the whatever object that you're trying to move. So you can't do it truly, from a distance. But okay, so Josh, you're saying that pulse of energy. So the pulse of energy could be like a real pulse, like a kapow, like Cyclops is, or it could be an on switch for the power, so that the pulse goes through, and then the night switch. Uh, uh, Nightcrawler is able to teleport.
Yeah, think of it like a neurotransmitter. Now, a,
Okay.
but it's essentially it's one you can learn to control, not dissimilar to how you can psych yourself up by you know
Ooh. Okay.
by going through a pre-sporting event ritual, or psych yourself out by going to something spooky. You can engender emotions in yourself. And
Oh,
in
nice.
theory, that's what mutants do, is they induct this expression of a whatever exotic energy neurotransmitter leads to their mutant power. Now,
Ooh.
using this energy is dictated by the neurophysical effort of the mutant creating the signal. So the greater the feat, the greater the strain, which means mutants have a higher resting body temperature than normal humans.
Oh, okay. All right. Gotcha. Because they're constantly like kind of flipping this thing on and off. So you're expending energy. So it's something that's not discussed a lot in X-Men lore, but and probably separate to our discussion, but I guess they'd have to like eat a lot more to power this, these extra bursts of energy, huh?
At
To get the calories for it.
at least mutants who are regularly using their powers, yeah, they'd have a higher metabolic rate, a higher resting body temperature, and that they'd have a higher resting body temperature than normal humans, and that distinction would make it easier for sentinel infrared cameras to identify them.
Oh, dude, were Sentinels like mutants and everything, but were they also like running around gunning down people with the flu?
I mean, they may. Oh, can you imagine you're out and walking around in New York and you sneeze and you hear "Stop, mutant."
Yeah, it's just like, and I bet you the jackasses that ran this thing was like, oh, a small price to pay for our freedom. We got to take some people out. We're just like, no, no, no. I just need some Nyquil, bro.
I was thinking more along the lines of the Sentinels act as different versions of thyroid scanners or PET scanners. So
Yeah.
mutants will have a higher resting body temperature, and depending on how they express their mutation, the ones who
Uh,
aren't apparent immediately visually, they are
Okay.
going to have more concentrated activity in areas from where their power is expressed, which
Okay.
again means it shouldn't be just the flu. But you bring up a really interesting point.
Oh gosh. It's like this facility is full of mutants. That's a hospital. That's a hospital. It's-
But
oh
here's
god.
the thing:
Okay. Sure.
we already have gene banks. Those
Yes.
exist currently. Not to
Oh yeah.
mention everyone and their cousin submitting their information to services like search your DNA to find out what percentage ancient Neanderthal you are, or
Oh well, yeah. Absolutely.
how Polish your dog is.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, Neanderthals were, coexisting with humankind, and we cross paths quite a bit.
The point
A
being,
lot. Yeah, yeah.
we would already know what an X gene looks like. So you load that into your temperature scanners and you say, okay, if maybe they have the flu, but
Okay,
now do a DNA scan, which in this universe is clearly
it's
something that can be done
possible.
like an
Sure,
X-ray, like an airport scanner, but
sure.
scan them, match it against the existing gene banks, and if you see non-human sequences, engage protocols.
Oh my god. Oh my god, Josh. Were Sentinels running around gunning down cancer patients? Mutant. No, that's leukemia. Oh, oh no. I mean, that makes me hate them even more.
Well, you're not supposed to like them, but I I think we have a pretty good explanation of a reasonable way that mutant powers would work and why Sentinels function even in the first place. Like, how would you
Gotcha.
identify someone? Well, you would look for how are they physiologically different, and then do
Gotcha.
further testing with that.
Sure. Okay. So, joking aside, if you're able to kind of track through a algorithm of, okay, elevated baseline temperature is an important aspect, perform a long range, type of genetic scan, which is, something that you could do, and then properly parse through that genetic scan to say, oh, I found, this activated, what we call junk DNA, but non-coding DNA that kind of jives or fits with the X gene.
Presumably, this would be similar to how Cerebro functions, although it's psychically powered. What is Professor X looking for as he scans the mind of all these mutants? Is it just some kid thinking, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, I just burned something down, or I shot lasers out of my eyes? Or is he searching for specific temperatures and firing patterns of neurons that would indicate that somebody has activated a mutant gene?
Oh, that's really interesting. You did talk about how you'd basically activate this kind of neuronal pulse that would turn on your power, or if you had an active power to, kind of power it, that would make the most sense if you're using something like Cerebro, to search out like neuronal patterns like that.
Which basically turns Professor X into the world's fanciest functional MRI.
Ooh, oh, okay, very nice. So not, and if it was read in the same type of a way, so you couldn't send out pulses of magnetic energy that far because you'd absolutely wreck everything. But if you were using the same type of nuclear magnetic resonance, reading basically proton spin. First of all, it'd be cool as hell to be able to do that from that range. But yeah, you could actually do like a functional MRI from long range, and absolutely you could finish that. That's pretty awesome.
And you know why I think there's a good reason it may work like that? Because the
Mm.
original Cerebro was built by not only Professor Xavier, but Eric Lencher, also known as Magneto. And who better to build
Oh.
an MRI than the master of magnetism, which makes Magneto the world's most powerful MRI tech, and Professor X the greatest radiologist to ever live.
That's a wonderful thing. I would absolutely love that. I wish he hadn't gotten all angry and bitter and turned supervillain. If he had turned his skills for medical diagnostics, oh man, we do have a revolution in medicine via mutation.
So now that we've established Professor X is a pretty effective radiologist, he is looking for neuronal patterns of mutants. He
Hmm.
gathers his first class, he gathers his X-Men around him, and while a number of different members have gone back and forth off the team over a number of years, those of us who grew up with the 1990s Saturday morning cartoon may remember the Ragin' Cajun, Gambit, Remy LeBeau.
Oh, I guarantee. Yes.
Gambit's the name. Remember it. Everybody
I
now,
love.
everyone listening at home, let's hear your worst Cajun accent.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh dear. Yeah. The Cajun area, for those of you listening from outside of the United States, and where Creole was spoken, was this beautiful amalgam, French influence and English influence and Native American and Black American influence all in one place, and they have this cool, distinctive accent, and culture and food and everything else. And Gambit was a suave debonair Cajun from down there who would steal all the women. And dude, he was,
Oh,
aside.
he would steal a
I
lot more than the women.
well,
He
I
was
mean, he had some cool powers, but I think one of his powers was his unending horniness. That guy could get the crap beaten out of him and explode everything, and like still be like, "Hello, beautiful." I love that.
so Gambit's ability we're going to talk about. He's an X-Men we haven't covered on this show before.
Mhm.
And interestingly, in the comics, Gambit, whose ability is biokinesis or energy manipulation, like
Yeah.
Rogue, also had trouble controlling his powers, with them slipping in and out of his control. Now, where Rogue would drain someone and knock them out, Gambit could essentially create bombs in his hands. So,
Yeah.
at one point, Mr. Sinister, who, even if you haven't seen the show, I feel like the name kind of gives it away.
Yeah, yeah, that's not one of the warm, fuzzy, nice guys.
So at one point in the comics, Mr. Sinister actually performed surgery on Gambit, removing a piece of his brainstem so his powers couldn't get as strong, and that basically nerfed him to the level we're familiar with from film and television in exchange for favors to Sinister later. Now, while the comics don't specify exactly what Sinister did to limit Gambit's powers, I feel like we can hypothesize that he acted on the midbrain.
Oh, oh, so the area where we have basically our central control. You're talking about the pawns and this area, or are we talking about more in the center where we have the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and our basal ganglia. That one.
So, for our home listeners, the
Hmm.
brainstem is composed of three sections. The
Okay.
midbrain plays a large role in muscle movement, including eye movement in someone who's acrobatic, perhaps due to their regulation of kinetic energy.
Hmm.
Um, Below the midbrain is the pons, which is like a bridge between the cerebellum that affects balance and the spinal cord that carries a lot of important information. This is why people who've had cerebellar strokes often have a lot of difficulty walking.
Think about how you move your arms, legs, body all at the same time in order to just take a step and walk without thinking about it, right? These are some of the patterns that our cerebellum holds and helps coordinate such that everything is kind of synchronized up at once for a movement that you did have to learn it, but it is kind of hard coded into ourselves as well. Speech, moving your eyes, walking, these are complex multi-limb movements, and you need to be able to take all the little firing from parts of the motor strip and pull it all together so that things fire in an exact sequence. If you don't have a working cerebellum, you can't do that. You're really just going to shake like a leaf.
So, if you're doing brain surgery on someone, you definitely want to avoid that area. You also
Yes.
want to avoid the medulla, which is what is referred to as our lizard brain, because it
Yeah.
helps us regulate essential functions such as breathing, heart rate, swallowing, things that you see people with dementia begin to lose. The midbrain is going to be the highest point if you want to take out somebody's unconscious ability, like a reflex or a neuronally activated mutant power, like we talk about, then probably putting some kind of control chip or lesion in there. And Mr. Sinister, being an expert geneticist, would have known how to do that and essentially place some controls on Gambit's mutant power.
Yeah. Oh, it's scary to think about. There are real life versions of people having a stroke in that area of the body, Josh, and it's kind of scary because they can't fall asleep unless they have assistance because that breathing is automatic. It's timed by the pawns. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to do anything. It's just regulated by how much oxygen and CO2 we have circulating around in specific parts of our body. And if you turn that off, you fall asleep and you stop breathing, unless you're hooked up to a machine. So manipulating that area would be a scary, scary thing. Not just shutting off mutant powers, but basically just setting you up to die.
At full power, Gambit's abilities let him do a lot more than just charge up cards or claws or make things glow pink and shortly explode.
Okay.
That's because he's manipulating biokinetic energy, his own and others, and he can manipulate how powerful it is based on how long he has to charge it up. So he essentially can do some of the following things just by stimulating various energies like infrared and microwave. He can increase molecular agitation, which charges something. All the molecules just zip around.
Yep.
Or he can withdraw energy, essentially freeze things by reducing their molecular activity. Therefore, if
So,
you agitate something enough, like a
sh-
playing card, the
right.
power of the explosive force is relative to the size of the object and the amount of energy he has to feed into it.
Oh, damn. So that's, you don't think about, a small thing like a card having a ton of energy, but, it's not just the energy that you can generate if you throw it or something like that. The very molecules inside of there have a bunch of energy if they, start to heat up. Or that's why, for instance, if you were to burn it, you could get a significant amount of heat off of there for a short amount of time. So that's kind of scary, Josh, that you could take just such a small object, and then especially if you were good at aiming and throwing it, you could pack a giant explosion into such a tiny little package and manipulate that how you will. That's a scary, scary super mutant power.
Well, if it does that much for a playing card, imagine what happens when you can charge up something as big as the wild sentinel that attacked Genosha.
Ooh, kaboom! Yeah,
Yeah.
and I am definitely, the thing that what else were you talking about? Just manipulating the energy, not just charging it up. What happens to if you decide to do that inside of someone? Yeah,
So
like a human.
Gambit can also heal himself by
Oh,
stimulating his cellular activity. So we don't think of healing ability being one of Gambit's. More rather, we talk about Wolverine. But in Gambit, let's talk about this. When your skin is intact, it generates an electric potential, so the outer surface is always negative with respect to the inner layers. That's why when you're injured and you cut the skin, those
mhm.
layers are severed. All the sodium and potassium ions that are traveling through your neurons or in your nerves begin to leak everywhere. It causes a short circuit in your body's flow of ions and electricity. This new, let's call it a wound current,
Sure. Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. There's a little action potential through there. Absolutely.
acts now as a natural cathode. You have an electrical charge, so you can start attracting cells like fibroblasts, like keratinocytes, like all the wound healing factors, as well as the macrophage that clean that debris, all while resealing the epidermis and reestablishing the normal skin field potential. So that's one way that Gambit could heal himself, just by manipulating his own energy.
Very okay. Very cool. So it's kind of scary to think about, but it's 100% true. Everything from sensation and movement to the passage of cells in our body that perform various functions, including healing. It's all chemoelectrical signals, right? Some of them are truly like more electrical than chemical, like you're thinking about a neuron going through. But almost all of them, even when they're largely chemical signals to make a cell come to a place where there's injury to help heal up, there is an electrical potential made across the surface of the cell with respect from the inside to the outside. That helps it move, that helps it turn on and work, and that drives a lot of the function. That is so wild if you could manipulate that at a small, teeny tiny level. I bet you it
So,
takes a lot of concentration too,
so,
like
essen-
focus.
So essentially, Gambit can ensure his body stays at optimal temperature. He can divert energy to stimulate cell growth and heal himself faster. He also could probably lessen the blow of any impact against him. But
All
his
right.
whole body is a piezoelectric material.
Whoa.
So is this possible? Well, researchers in Scotland, not named Moira McTaggart, found if they used channel blocking drugs to inhibit sodium ions, they could interrupt electrical signals, create this wound current, and if they did that, their wounds took longer to heal. So they wanted to test if the reverse would be true, and meta analysis seems to suggest yes, if you amplify the wound current, you can double the healing rate of things like bed sores. Small electric currents applied to wound dressings can accelerate bone fracture healing and help blood vessels grow towards healing wounds faster. So imagine you go into the hospital for surgery. Afterwards, you have the regular bandage, and then on top of that, they put a tiny little electrode, not to the level of that abdominal one that's supposed to give you 6-minute abs by
No,
shocking you,
no, no.
but
Small,
running
small current,
but
small current.
running a small current can actually help the wound close faster by attracting more healing factors to the wound.
Makes a lot of sense thinking about how cells communicate with each other in order to execute wound healing. I imagine that you would have to have a very good understanding of precisely how to tune how much current goes through and when and for how long. So it wouldn't be one of these open and shut things where you could just take a couple of wires from the wall. You have to be very, very careful, and the circumstances would have to be right. But it would be so beautiful to optimize wound healing in this way with a fairly simple methodology.
So in 2011, Richard Nuccitelli created a non-invasive device that could deal with human skin, allowing our injury currents, to be observed. He called it the dermacorder, and it could sense whatever the nearest voltage is between the strength of a person's wound current, and from that you could infer their ability to heal. So people who had a very weak measurable current were noted to heal more slowly than those whose injury current was louder or more amplified. And wound current strength wanes with age, emitting a signal that's only half as strong in people that over the age of 65 as it is in those under 25.
This goes to a phenomenon that we know about called immune senescence. There are other factors for it. Our T cells actually are slower to recognize pathogens. Our cells as a whole have accumulated mutations and have kind of after replicating so many times have become a little slow, sluggish. But it makes perfect sense that along with it, these electrical potentials slow down.
Now, traditionally, you asked, what Gambit could do to somebody's internal organs.
Right.
Historically, he's only been able to charge inorganic objects. Part of that's from what Sinister did to him, but also
Okay.
think about that. Something like breathing or a heartbeat, if you're trying to feed energy into it, well, if you have a regular beat, even an irregular one, that's going to disrupt the energy flow or transfer of energy and keep the charge from taking. So, the unconscious nature of our own breathing or heartbeats or pulse is essentially prevents Gambit from charging humans to explode.
A little hand wavy, but okay.
Okay, but what other Gambit like abilities are available to you and me? Well, even though we can't regulate it to the same level as Remy, we can also use our kinetic energy to charge things, perhaps one day even medical devices. Now, an ongoing
Oh.
topic of research has been how to create an effective energy source for a device like a pacemaker, so it'll do its job your entire lifespan without having to need every 5 to 15 years battery replacements.
Oh, okay. So trying to power the pacemaker with the electrical potential from the human itself.
So, in a study funded by the U.S. National Institute of Health, engineers at the Thayer School of Engineering in Dartmouth have developed a dime sized device that combines thin film energy conversion materials, those are known as piezoelectrics, with
Hmm.
a minimally invasive design to enable what they call a self charging battery. So, it took 3 years to do the study and proposed modifying pacemakers to harness the kinetic energy of the lead wire that's attached to the heart. So essentially, every time the heart beats, the wire in the pacemaker reads that beat and steals a little bit of electricity from it, feeding it into the machine that then turns around and keeps the heart beating.
Very cool. Yeah, yeah. Piezoelectrics have been used for a very, very long time. In fact, uh, you may have a piezoelectric charger or device that you may have in your your water boiler to help light your pilot light. Essentially, these are materials that if you bend or deform them, they send a charge across, and you can use that to create a spark. For instance, in a lot of those like lighters that you have, which are piezoelectric, or you can use it in this case to actually generate the charge, which will send, that charge to a battery, basically. So you still have to have a battery on board, right, Josh? You could that
You still need a battery, but essentially that
okay,
battery converts mechanical motion to electricity. And the idea
got
is you charge the battery as it goes, so you never need
right.
to replace it, which in a pacemaker is pretty important.
Yeah, yeah.
As opposed
That's a pretty
as
good way.
opposed to the gyroscope and piezoelectrics in, say, an Apple Watch or a step tracker.
Oh, yep, there. Same sorts of principles, absolutely. Yeah, motion generating charge, and in this case, using that charge to recharge battery.
So while Gambit's abilities are often used for offense. He's not really going to be one of the medical members of the team. His own control over his body is remarkably impressive and something I think the show really hasn't done justice to until recently.
Very cool. I like it.
Now let's talk about Wolverine.
No segue, Josh. Just
Snickety
let's.
snicked.
Yeah. I want everyone listening to know that, yeah, a decade, yes, it's podcast, but for decades, Dr. Josh, as long as he has studied biology and human biology and genetics, there has been no other true goal than to discuss how he can turn himself into a Wolverine.
Just the healing factor, not the claws.
Just the healing factor, and you're absolutely obsessed with it. We have presented at panel shows, and we had to include a Wolverine. The only thing I can't understand is how we're able to segue away from this, because I think we have other topics afterwards.
Listen.
Yeah,
this is important, Santhosh. We found the first of many steps. The second step, third
sure.
step, I don't know, but another step on the path to becoming Wolverine again,
Okay.
in Scotland.
Oh, everything comes back to Scotland. Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Apparently, it's where all the mutant research takes place. So,
sure.
This is a few years old, but Jo Cameron, a 66-year-old Scottish woman, is essentially a real life pain insensitive mutant. So this
okay.
was first learned when she underwent hand surgery at the age of 66 and required absolutely no post-operative anesthesia or pain control.
Oh, okay.
Imagine having your hip replaced, your knee replaced, your elbow or your wrist operated on, and afterwards, like, you want any pain medication? You're like, no, I'm good. Not even a Tylenol, perhaps? No, you wussy.
Yeah. Well, it has its advantage in this sense of, you don't feel pain. This is informally called CEPA, congenital insensitivity to pain. Okay.
Throughout her life, Cameron reported minimal anxiety,
yes,
minimal fear, and uncanny ability to heal rapidly from cuts and bruises. So, of course, the government got involved to investigate this mutant and her healing abilities.
Oh God, poor thing. I should note, I don't quite know how good her healing is, right? If you can heal fast from cuts and bruises, that's wonderful and fine. But a lot of these congenital insensitivity to pain syndromes, whether it's this particular mutant or somebody else, you do have one big problem in that if you have a serious injury, if you have a problem, okay, again, your foot gets cut off, you get a bad blow to the head and you're going to be concussed. You won't feel the normal sensations that would go with it that would warn you that, like, hey, something is wrong. And so you can damage whatever that is, your limb, or sometimes even your brain, even further by not taking steps to protect yourself.
Upon scrutinizing Cameron's genetic profile, the Men in Black, the UCL researchers, led by somebody not affiliated with the Weapon X project at all, a Dr. Andrei Okorokov, made remarkable discoveries that shed some light on her resilience. So she had 2 genetic mutations, both linked to a pain-related enzyme called fatty acid amide hydrolase, or FA.
I love that it's just Fa. Okay, so we've got a specific enzyme that's been mutated.
One mutation was also found in a pseudogene called Fa out, a region of DNA that resembles a gene but doesn't actually code for anything. It's just an attachment point for transcription factors. Think of it like a boat dock. So
Yeah. So this is one of the on switches in genes. So if if FAH needs to be turned on and transcribed in more uh, kind of at a higher rate, then a factor can come and attach to this and say, "Hey, turn on this gene, make a lot of this enzyme."
now, Fa has previously been associated with pain modulation, pain perception. It breaks down a neurotransmitter that binds to our pain relieving or cannabinoid receptors. Yes, those are the same ones that marijuana acts on.
Yeah.
In studies involving mice who are bred without the Fa gene, meaning there's nothing to break down the cannabinoid receptors, they
Hmm.
had reduced sensitivity to pain. They wouldn't feel pain. It's because
Oh,
those cannabinoids would be floating around for a longer period of time because there's nothing to break them down.
got
Now,
it. Got it.
what it breaks down when it's not cannabinoids is something called andamide, which also has painkiller effects. So, Fa is involved in pain, sensation, mood, and memory, and has been studied as such for the last 20 years. Fa out regulates how much Fa is made. So, the UCL researchers used CRISPR to induce variations of her mutation on different cell lines, and not it's not quite walls and walls of clones of this woman in vats, but it's yes to petri dishes as far as the eye can see.
Oh, very nice. Okay. So, all right. So, this is what you were talking about first steps. So, we were able to induce the mutation on the cell line in the petri dish. We have been able to manipulate this gene in, breeding colonies in mice. But this is not something that we can easily use in terms of like a clinical application yet.
And I should mention a couple of the other effects of Fa out that, while still in line with Wolverine, are a little bit less positive. Um, it's been Other effects of the Fa out mutation include memory problems, which we
Uh-huh.
know Wolverine historically has.
Okay.
Um,
Yep.
which make
Okay. So, I need to find out where I came from. Buy a journal.
Well, the point being that yes, this woman who has Wolverine's insensitivity to pain also has memory problems. Although
Oh
I don't know
God.
that she has the same bloody history. Um, it
I
all also
I just
an unusual
Josh,
reaction.
this I need to know because I need to plan my life. Are we going to Scotland?
I mean, we're not going to Scotland.
Okay. I'll call the hospital and tell them I can't take call.
Also,
uh,
because of this lack of pain sensitivity, she has an unusual reaction or tolerance to eating spicy peppers like Scotch bonnets,
well,
ghost ghost peppers, and others. You can sit there, eat spicy food all day, and because you can't feel pain, you'll just be like, "Oh, tickles." Um,
yeah, we have our salty, sweet, sour, umami receptors and everything. The receptor that actually senses spice is actually just a bare pain receptor. So congratulations, all you masochists who love spicy food.
but remember, especially with the memory issues,
Yeah,
Fa acts on cannabinoid receptors. And what else is something associated with marijuana use? Poor memory and learning. So
sure.
this may be unwanted byproducts of pain sensitivity. You don't want to remember pain. Your body works to forget it, even though we need that lesson to avoid getting the same type of future pain. So
Right.
now we have not only a step closer to real world Wolverine, but also explanations for in universe Wolverine, why he has some of the issues he does. Sure, he can always drink beer and eat spicy food. The man can't feel anything, and he doesn't remember it because of all these pain controlling hormones floating around in his head. Uh,
Yeah, and he'll rush into fights and go absolutely insane because he doesn't have anything controlling anxiety and fear either. Wow.
So, a little bit more than just PTSD. Um, Last but not least, we also saw in X-Men 97 one well-known hero who is not a mutant,
Hmm.
and who has at least an iteration of the character's movie coming out soon, and that's Captain America.
Gotcha. And yes, our current Captain America that we're here in 2024 when we're waiting for the next series to come out is neither a mutant nor a mutate. So, Josh, Steve Rogers, when he had his genetics and everything changed by super soldier serum, he would have been a mutate, correct?
Correct.
Got it. Okay, but now we're dealing with someone who's just a non-mutant, non-mutate taking on the mantle of Captain America.
He may be Captain America, but he's no Steve Rogers.
It's-
But
yeah, yes.
But we're not here to talk about Brave New World. I'm here
Mm.
to speculate on how to make a super soldier serum. It's
Oh.
been an ongoing problem in the comics, in the films.
Mhm.
Everybody wants to recreate Captain America, and the failures to do it lead to things like the Hulk, like Wolverine himself, like multiple other weapon projects.
Yeah, the Winter Soldier.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So the question is, let's see if we can piece together using modern studies what a super soldier serum would look like. So
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
if we go back and we watch Captain America the First Avenger, or you read the comics, the procedure for the serum requires injections in all the major muscle groups, at least a couple organs, and bone marrow, something that you have to eat, so an ingestible variant, targeted injections of adrenaline, and finally, saturation with some form or wavelength of light codenamed Vita rays in a
Yeah,
specially designed Vita chamber.
yeah. So, uh, something to change genes. I think, as far as you and I have figured out, that you'd have to splice something in, or activate some genetic codes to help with things like muscle strength, endurance, and all this kind of thing. The adrenaline to actually like activate those genes and kind of make you like accelerate the change. And then the Vita rays were electromagnetic radiation of some kind. I hope they weren't, the gamma rays that the Hulk was blasted with or something like that. But yeah, you need kind of everything all at once in that scary little chamber, which is why it works uniquely at one time. And then if you lose the special sauce or you imbalance that or anything, then you mess up and you don't get any decent super soldiers, or you get a mistake or something going on if you screw up any one of those aspects, because this is
So
a
working
complicated process.
so working backwards, the Vita chamber would just have to be something that could contain the energy and also has a filter for the light. So you're turning it into some form of laser because you need it, just like sunlight induces changes in vitamin D in our bodies. Vita rays would induce changes in the body, filtering through the Vita chamber, and again, some form, I would guess, of ultraviolet radiation. Now,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, the adrenaline is to speed the process up. And that means you need whatever you're ingesting. That super soldier serum is going to need to be something that gets into the bloodstream. So you would have to have vectors in the bloodstream that
Hmm.
carry, let's say, pre made adeno or lentiviruses
Hmm. Oh, sure. So that those would be the delivery systems for genes. Uh huh.
that would have proteins on it that would seek out targeted sections of the subject's DNA and RNA, all sped up by adrenaline. So this happens over minutes or hours instead of weeks, days, or years. Now,
Yes.
once you bind with the RNA, which then binds with the DNA, you're triggering an epigenetic reaction that's going to turn on and off certain genes that fundamentally transform the recipient to peak human performance. So you're going to need some kind of excessive production of adult and embryonic stem cells because that's going to
Mhm.
generate the needed materials to make alterations. Uh,
Okay.
which we have. Certain parts of our body already regenerate. The liver, um, certainly neurons, our neuroplasticity.
Mhm.
So you would need something that would allow you to create stem cells to build on those other parts. So let's say we have access to those stem cells. What
Sure.
are the things that we're going to specifically act on? Well, we can work on something called myostatin. Now,
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
there's a researcher, Brian Casper, at Ohio State University, who has been studying possible treatments for muscular dystrophy.
Oh,
And
okay.
and we're going to come back to this myostatin idea. I'll let you talk about it in a moment. But Casper is part of a team that has inserted a myostatin gene into muscles in macaque monkeys that ramps up production of a protein called follistatin, which is an inhibitor of myostatin. They
Oh,
injected it.
very nice. Okay.
So, what does myostatin do, Santosh?
So, myostatin, you almost wonder why the heck myostatin came. It holds the or I guess the hypertrophy of your muscles in check. And truth be told, if you didn't have something like this, you'd basically, your limbs would grow into a mass of muscles, and you'd be strong as hell, but you wouldn't be able to move. So you'd be kind of stuck. But myostatin is the brake. So if you're saying that there are mechanisms that's like an accelerator pedal to help you make your muscles bigger, stronger, myostatin is the brake that actually activates to actually slow down and keep muscle growth in check. So if you delete
So,
it, you get super beefy.
myostatin is the guy, when you want to fight somebody, myostatin is the guy holding you back. And
Yeah.
follistatin is the
Okay.
one coming up, putting a hand on myostatin's shoulder and saying, "No, let him fight."
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. A lot of our genes and proteins like this and pathways have these redundant and, kind of meta um, forward and backwards loops for feedback. So you have something that, okay, this stimulates this process. Well, this inhibits the thing that stimulates the process.
So let's see what happens. So the team
Yeah.
injected into the right thigh muscle of 6 macaque monkeys, uh,
Hmm.
and within a few months, they began to see changes. So muscles started to get larger, and tests showed that the treated muscles also became stronger than untreated muscles. So
Oh, okay.
we're starting super soldier serum testing in monkeys, and
Hmm.
that's a real thing that we're doing.
Yep.
Um, and now they want to move on to begin in patients who have a disease called inclusion body myositis, which leaves thigh muscles so weak that people are unable to stand. So, muscular dystrophy, yes, but they're working their way up with one muscle group at a time. And this is still over a series of months, not, a couple minutes or hours like we see in the Captain America movie. But that
Yeah.
explains at least part of the muscular physique. So we've got something there. Now, we also can look into something called the ACT-N3 gene, and that
Okay.
increases the volume of fast twitch muscle fibers. We have fast twitch and slow twitch, and depending on how many of those fibers, that tells you how fast you can contract your muscle, how much force you can generate. Fast twitch obviously gives you a lot of power. Slow twitch gives you more endurance.
Yeah. So you have to think of, by and large, slow twitch are found in large muscle groups that need to do things in a slow, regulated manner. But also need to last for a really, really long time, right? So everything in your back and in your butt, and your hamstrings and thighs and everything. A lot of those, yes, you can build up fast twitch fibers in them if you need to, but you need to stand, and you need to stand for long periods of time during the day without these muscles giving out. So these are what you think of as slow twitch fibers, and the fast twitch ones, the biggest ones that I can tell you about, are the most common ones, are the ones that run your fingers, right? If you're a piano player, if you're a violin player, and then there's lots of fast twitch fibers in your tongue, that allow your tongue to move super, super fast and make all these wonderful syllables.
A little known ability of Captain America. It's
Yeah. And actin, ACTN, probably there. Actin is one of the two partners. I don't know if you remember, Josh, when we learned about muscle physiology, we had a wonderful teacher who would tell us about the opera of actino and myosino, which are the two proteins that come together that help muscles contract. So the fast twitch fibers in this case, part of what makes them fast twitch is the type of actin that's actually makes up the structure in the middle of that muscle.
now now we have additional muscle mass, as
Mm-hmm.
well as more power in those muscles. Let's not forget the LRP5 gene, which we've spoken about in other comic book medicine talks, most notably when we talk about Luke Cage and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
incredibly dense bones.
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
So now you've got bones that are extremely resistant to breaks without sacrificing normal functionality.
Mm-hmm. We actually talked about a few mutants, I believe, right? A family with a mutation in this gene. Is that correct?
Yeah, real mutants, like people who live in Connecticut and have the
Yeah.
like not cartoon mutants. This is
Yeah, yeah. These were folks who actually, members of this family got into bad car accidents and didn't break a single bone, like that kind of thing.
Let's continue to build Captain America's physique. So the cardiovascular system has to be overhauled, where you need higher production of blood in the circulatory system for better oxygenation and higher concentration of red blood cells. Now,
Oh, yes. So you need to be able to power all this stuff that you've created. So you need to deliver oxygen and nutrients.
which means some form of erythropoietin that's more increased, or something that increases bone marrow production.
Mm-hmm.
Then you need to have automatic metabolic responses to regulate body temperature to avoid overheating. And that means something like an overgrown thyroid to regulate your temperature.
That's why his neck was so thick.
Hmm.
So yeah, you'd have to have increased expression of things like thyroid, cortisol, all these kind of things. But I think it would be important for these processes to also be well regulated, right? Because if you just make Captain America hyperthyroid, he's just going to waste away because he's just going to burn up metabolically and nothing else, and so he'll just be skin and bones, and all his hair will fall out. So you need the thyroid gland to express enough thyroxine, but at the right time, cortisol and adrenaline boosts to happen again in spikes at the right time. And then you're right, Josh, the braking mechanisms, the ones that kind of bring you down out of fight or flight, also have to be well regulated and well expressed, so that you don't basically have adrenaline and everything else running all the time, and you just you finish kicking ass and die of a heart attack.
So you'd also need a higher mitochondrial count. But let's not
Oh.
forget that Captain America is also tactically brilliant. So the brain matter also has to enhance, which means you need a higher production of glial cells, and you need to be able to
Oh.
store memories for longer periods of time. So, oh, and then the DEC2 gene changes
Mhm.
circadian rhythm, allowing the subject to function normally on fewer hours of sleep. But let's talk about this growing glial cells and neuroplasticity. Historically, we have thought that the more neurons you have, the smarter you are. But neurons look pretty much the same in us, in chimpanzees, in pigs, in mice. We've all got the same looking neurons. It's just what you do with them.
Sure, sure. Yeah, how they're organized, how they fire, how coordinated they are, and how connected they are to other neurons.
But when you look at glial cells, which were just thought to be the glue sort of that held neurons together, they were previously only thought of as a support structure. But now,
Hmm.
glial cells in humans are distinctly identifiable from glial cells in other animals. They're larger,
Oh.
they're shaped a little bit more star like, think like astrocytes.
Hmm.
And in order to investigate this further, in 2013, a study published in Cell found that transplanting human glial cells, so human brain cells, into neonatal mice's brains allowed them to learn more quickly. So they would put this human cell into a mouse and they would run it through a maze, and they would do the same thing with this test mouse, and the human brained mouse was
Hmm.
able to learn it further even when the human brain cell was transplanted into another mouse, so you retain some memories, which suggests
Josh, are you you're not going off script and telling us the story of the rats of Nim.
I'm not telling you about the rats of Nim. Now, this
Because we know what happened there with like Nicodemus and all the scary stuff. I don't think I can, like, I'm not going to sleep tonight if this is actually
so
happening in real life.
the study also suggested glial cells play an important role in learning. Although they lack the ability to send electric signals, they help to provide nutrients and insulation, increasing the conducting speed of your neurons. So, only in the last decade have we learned that there's special kinds of glial cells that have their own form of chemical signaling, not electrical, and they can coordinate whole groups of neurons. So these are all the components you would need to mix into your super soldier serum, but every one of Captain America's abilities is individually achievable.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Only one of
The
Wolverine's, but every one of Captain America's.
the process that you're describing when you're talking about humanizing mice, this has been done many, many times in infectious diseases when we actually study how the skin reacts to MRSA infections, right? Staph infections. We often have to use humanized mice who have human like fibroblasts and immune interface in their skin because otherwise mice don't react the same way to Staph aureus. This type of, kind of a hybrid mouse, when you make it, it's kind of neat because you can study the effect of one component of a human cell or protein in a separate context to see what exactly it does. For everyone who's having trouble understanding, what glial cells are or what neurons are, think of your neurons as the bare wire, like the copper wire running through and providing power to whatever appliance or maybe information from a computer to another. If you were to just leave that bare wire out there, right, you'd lose a lot of energy. It would leak. You'd have interference from everything. And actually, ultimately, it would be a very inefficient, wire that would happen. But if you insulate it with rubber, or any type of silicon on the outside, now all of a sudden, just by creating a sheath and a protection, you increase the efficiency of power and information that's going down this wire. This essentially is one of the superpowers that glial cells provide to our neurons, and a lot of why our neurons can do things that maybe a mouse neuron can't.
We have shown you kind of the existing science behind all the different things that go into super soldier serum and America's most famous mutate, who got into a bit of a tiff with our X-Men, and which we may see Avengers vs. X-Men in future seasons. So,
Ooh, yeah, that'd be cool.
but that's it for this week and this year. If you are unfamiliar with any of the characters we've talked about, go pick up a comic book and check it out. They're really fun.
Hmm. There's so much fun. I'm telling you, every single time, Josh, you teach me about this stuff, and I get to learn about the cool things that these superhumans and superheroes do. It makes me appreciate it more and more and more. And the fact that we can bridge it over now to like what's being done with the actual science, I love it.
So that's it for this week and season 10. As always, we love to hear your comments, questions, and feedback. If you'd like to support us spiritually, emotionally, or financially, links to do
Mm.
that are in the show notes, along with links for further reading and a couple comic suggestions. Our theme music is composed by Rachel Leisure. The show is produced by me with a lot of help from Dr. Santhosh and friends. And look for us to make some live appearances in this upcoming year, talking about things like comic book medicine. And until next time, as always, keep a song in your heart, soap on your hands, a shot in your arm, a spin on your globe, a Saturday morning cartoon on your telly, a comic book in your hand. And when you've done all of those things, pick a place, pick a thing you want to do, and happy travels.
Bye, everybody.